Ah, yes, the perfect place for shade under money trees. That is, only if you're a tree planter. It's the only way that money truly grows on trees. Welcome to another episode of ZFK Talks. I would implore you, if you are interested in tree planting or a tree planter yourself looking for content on the subject, to close this video right now. Head to my main page and look for Guardians of the Earth, a documentary at 30 minutes length that I have put together about the entire industry and my experiences within it. So what is tree planting? Tree planting is basically a industrialized way of replacing trees that have been cut down for the lumber industry. In Canada and other countries around the world, we have a lot of forest that gets cut down for lumber, and the government does mandate that these lumber companies come back and plant the land so that it can be reused and also not sit there as dead wasteland. So, with that said, this industry is what I would call a great equalizer, an industry that will humble you, chew you up, and spit you out as a brand new person, for better or worse. In the bush, it's truly survive or thrive, and I truly do hate this job just as much as I do love it, and that is why I am returning for another delicious serving of tree planting again in just about a week for my second season. One thing that is true is that nothing worth doing in life is ever easy. In this industry, you definitely will see people for who they truly are. Traumas and true personalities come to light in this industry in every individual, and societal rules don't apply. The best planters are not necessarily those with all the brawn and muscle. It's usually those that are the most committed and determined to put out the best numbers possible, regardless of what their physical body is like. Mind over matter, for sure. So how did I get into tree planting? Definitely an interesting story, and as stated in the documentary, it's not something I ever imagined doing in a million years. So it just so happens that my high school sweetheart went on to do a lot of different schooling and traveling after high school. We had a 7-year period that we didn't see each other after graduation, in which time I did not hear from her often, but when I did, once or twice a year, it was always, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm living this crazy life in the bush. It's awesome. You should come try it. Come join me. And I never bat an eye at any of these invitations or requests to come and do what she was doing out in the bush. I thought it was a very foolish decision for me. At the time, it felt like I had it all. I was waiting tables and also growing my business very quickly, and it seemed like walking away from all of that just made no sense. But things change, and that's when the pandemic came through, in which time I lost a lot. So did everyone else. I couldn't go to work at a restaurant here in Niagara Falls like I had for many years prior. My business, like anyone else, really slowed down. A lot of people weren't looking to use marketing tools for their business, and they were more in a survival mode rather than thriving. So with that said, I lost clients. I had people that straight up went belly up and didn't even pay me, effectively went bankrupt, and all kinds of disasters unfolded in that time. Over the 2 years of COVID, I really changed a lot, and not for the better. 2020 wasn't so much an issue, as I still had work coming through and did have a healthy partner to lean on at that time. But going into the end of 2020, that was over. We split up, and basically I hit a couple month stint of being in a really good spot. I was working again. Business-wise, things were going well, and I was hitting the gym every day, and I was in a great spot physically and mentally, and that's when the unthinkable happened, and that was when lockdowns in Canada ensued to start the beginning of 2021. And 2021 was totally different than 2020, and what ended up happening was almost all of my clients disappeared in a short amount of time at the beginning of 2021. My income dried up 100%. We were in lockdown. I had no outlet, couldn't go to the gym, nothing like that. And it was a very, very depressing time. that I did not forego very well at all. And at that point, my frustrations grew with the on and off lockdowns, and things did not make sense to me. It didn't seem right what we were doing in terms of shutting down entire industries and businesses in the name of a flu. We'll call it that. I don't want to get too deep in the rabbit hole. And effectively, that's when I started making plans to exit the country. And I planned to do it later in 2021 because I knew the lockdowns were going to keep coming and they were going to shut our businesses off and on and off and on. And I just couldn't fathom the thought of doing it again. So later in 2021, I got invited to come back to my serving job that I had prior to the original lockdowns, made some money, was doing well in my investments in the market, exceptionally well, as a matter of fact. And by the fall of 2021, they had announced that you will no longer be able to enter or exit the country in terms of how things were going between Canada and the United States if you did not do the thing. And I refused to do the thing. I've always been a exceptionally healthy person with a great immune system, and with the way it was rolled out so quickly and the massive media campaign around it, it seemed very, very not a good idea to stay in a country that was taxing me to high heavens and effectively trying to tell me what I can do every step of the way, shutting my business down and reopening it over and over again. So what did I do? With 25 days notice approximately of how long I could get on a plane before I wouldn't be allowed to anymore, I booked everything and got everything in order and basically crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's to make an exit from Canada. And I really had no plans of ever coming back because I didn't see how this situation was going to get any better. So on October 29th, the last day that you could leave Canada, I went to Toronto Pearson, got on a plane, flew into the United States and over into Mexico, where I started a new journey for 3 months where I thought I was going to be done working labor or waiting tables and such for the rest of my life. I truly believe that with how everything was going investments-wise. Over that 3 months, it ended up being more vacation. I was doing a couple different jobs remotely from there, planning, managing, and contracting people to shoot jobs for me while I edited from abroad. And over that time, the markets flipped for the worst, dumped me right on my head. I lost a lot of money, more than what most people will lose in just a couple months' time in their entire life. And at that point, I was running out of cash toward the 3-month mark and had to make an exit plan for Mexico to come back to Canada, despite everything that was going on. The good news with that story is I came back. There was a great big blue-collar revolution taking place in Ottawa, which I did get to participate in. I went in to go take professional portraits of these protesters there and show the world that these people aren't all what they've been chalked up to be in the media. They weren't racist, misogynists, and terrorists's. So from there, it was like a new kind of chapter and alleviation of all the pandemic anxiety and depression I had. I felt like there was truly hope for Canada again. I seen that people were there together under a common cause, and the love and the vibes were just bar none and amazing. After that, I went back to my serving job for the first couple months that I was home, March and April. And what happened was, while I was in Mexico, my high school sweetheart was also traveling Mexico, Nicaragua, and some of these other Central American spots in between Mexico and South America. She just happened to come home at the same time as I, and we ended up reconnecting. And it was definitely weird because she had asked to make plans with me, and I was this close to not doing it. And we did get back together and basically got to figure out what's been going on in each other's lives over the last 7 years while we were apart. So where does that lead me? It led me to probably about a month or so of hanging out, hearing about tree planting nonstop. She was obsessed with it. I still thought it was kind of a silly thing to do, but good for her for being happy. And She was leaving to go do her tree planting season, and it was farewell. Until we ended up having a night with her parents and having some drinks, and she was still explaining how it wouldn't be too late for me to go and how she thinks that I would really like it and I'd be a good candidate to fill in as a tree planter. And at that point, I had like a light bulb moment. And the light bulb said, "You've been doing the same thing for about 5-6 years. Every summer, you bust your ass waiting tables. It's a lot of stress. You do your business on the side, and that's how you make your income in the summer." And I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe I could use a change. Maybe because business is slow in this post-pandemic era, and because I was 25 at the time, still pretty young, why not just give it a shot? Jump out in the bush, try something completely different and out of my skill set, and no matter how bad it is, no matter how excruciating it is, no matter how bad I want to quit and go home, see it through to the end and see how you come out on the other side. And that, ladies and gentlemen, entering the world of tree planting was one of the greatest decisions of my life, hands down, bar none. Going into it was a strict one-time experience, no exceptions. I was going to go and do it as best as I could. And besides, if my itty-bitty little high school sweetheart could do it, so could I. Why not? And what I ended up deciding very early on was that this was a great decision. It was a profoundly unique experience, and it truly did make me happy. So at which point I kind of decided, you know what, maybe I will block off a couple months of the year every year to do this. And if I can push my business and other such things around to a point of having this time for a couple months every year to do this, I would really like to have 1 million trees under my waist belt. It would be a really cool achievement and definitely something that I would not regret doing in life. So I think it's a guaranteed 2 or 3 year stint I'm going to be doing this, but if I can hit a 5th or 6th season to hit 1 million trees, by all means, I think that would be just a really cool thing to say that I made time for in my life. To me, it seems like everyone that is willing to take the risk of trying something new and doing tree planting, they're usually out-of-the-box thinkers, risk takers, and they are willing to break the status quo. I would say these are all traits that I personally have, and so did most of the people that I met out there in camp. Needless to say, with my previous resume and understanding of quality expectations, client management, and such, I quickly gained a pretty good grasp on what our job is as individual tree planters in relation to our company and the lumber industries that fund our paychecks. So let's talk about tree repos. Everyone has to do them. They're not very much fun. But effectively, if you have shit trees or tight spacing, you gotta go back in your piece and start pulling trees and also giving them a light tug to see if they're tight. Because tight is important. You don't want loose trees. You don't want leaning trees. However, today I am doing a bit of a density bump. So what that means is, depending on plot measurements and piece prescription, which is the amount of trees that should fit per hectare into your piece, then you may have to effectively bump it up if you don't have enough trees for the prescription. In Alberta, it's 10-foot spacing. However, mine's a bit longer because I have PTSD from planting short in Ontario and having my pieces repoed twice. So that's what we're doing today. Tree planting is very much so about managing client expectations, which I'd happen to know a little bit about. And every time we move camp, we usually work for a different logging company or planting company, which give us our contracts and our blocks, which are split into pieces, and then we plant those individually. Basically, different clients have different specifications, different preferences, different species they like, different land, and through communication and good planning, clients will communicate with our crew supervisor to the crew bosses, and from there, we make the client happy. So how did I better myself through this experience? This was an opportunity to rebrand myself. Over COVID, I kind of went from being a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, adventurous individual who really, over the pandemic years, had a crusty husk of negativity that formed over myself, and going out into tree planting and becoming my most authentic self again, without fear of judgment of others, really helped me break that husk off and kind of be reborn in a way. Over the experience, I became happier like I used to be and less shrouded in anxiety and depression. And with that said, I restored my once fully authentic self. You do come to realize that it's not the things that you have, but rather how you spend your time and who you spend it with. Certainly, I became far more in tune with being present, eliminating all distractions, just focusing on the day-to-day life of tree planting and what it has to offer. Not to mention learning a ton about nature and really feeling that intermingling with it and oneness. I had spent quite a bit of time in my youth in nature through going camping, road trips with the family, Boy Scouts, etc. And never did I spend the sheer amount of time, quite literally, in the bush at all times, every single day. And you witness like a lot of interesting things in nature that you wouldn't otherwise see. I had close encounters with deer. We would drive by all kinds of wildlife, bears, caribou, moose, etc. Even one really interesting thing I had written down in my notes for this was that I learned that butterflies are actually carnivorous. I thought they just ate natural, matter like pollen and such, but one day I had my break spot, or we call it a cache, where you re-up on trees and you have your bug spray and your sunscreen and your lunch and whatever supplies you need just outside of your planting piece where we plant the trees. And I had spent 3 days at this cache by myself at my great big piece that took a couple days to complete in Ontario. And I remember arriving there, dropping my tree boxes in my bag and preparing the cache, and seeing that frogs had just laid hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of eggs in which tadpoles were now emerging. And these tadpoles were swimming around in the water, and they were obviously just in that stage between a tadpole and a frog. And the weather warmed up over the 3 days from rainy to sunny, to the point where these little puddles I was sitting next to for those 3 days progressively dried up a little bit more and a little bit more every day. And the tadpoles that were on the edges of this puddle that got sucked into the dirt perished. And by the third day, the puddles had fully dried up. There was no water left, and there was these big black mounds of dead tadpoles. And sure enough, there were monarch butterflies coming in and leeching off the tops of these black mounds of dead tadpoles. And that's just like an example of something interesting that I didn't expect to see in nature. And it kind of gave me that reflection of circle of life and death and life, and how things cycle through and nothing's forever. And unfortunately for all those tadpoles, they did perish. And yeah, just a cool example of something cool I seen in the bush, and how I became more in tune with how things really work out there. Next up, what are the pros of planting? Excruciating character building work, or hardening up, plus pain tolerance. There's never a day that goes by that something doesn't hurt you while you're working, whether it be your joints, your bones, the weight of your bags in many trees, very often cutting yourself, slicing yourself open on dead wood and such that has been left in these planting pieces, etc. You do lose lots of weight. We are generally walking 50 to 60,000 steps a day, which does burn 5 to 8,000 calories, in which case hardly anyone can eat that many calories. We eat very well in the bush. We do have a personal chef that cooks for our camp of 30. Very good and nutritious meals, but it doesn't matter how much you eat, you won't be able to keep the weight on. And everyone comes out looking much thinner than they did going into it with their winter weight. With that exercise, it does boost your brain chemistry. So anyone struggling with anxieties or depression will feel a benefit from tree planting without any medication, just due to the sheer amount of stress you're putting on your body and those feel-good chemicals that come from being in good shape like that. Another pro, if you like the environment, tree planting does help the environment, kind of. Depends on how you manage the forest. That is called silviculture, and that's the study or the industry of basically forest building. The problem with tree planting is that tree planting does promote monocultures, which in a normal forest that's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, there's all kinds of species of trees and such, but when we're planting trees, it's only a select few that go in, and they're effectively like seedling clones. So with that said, they are more susceptible to things like bug infestations and tree disease and such, and can be more prone to forest fire if that's the case, but they're usually checked in on and managed if there's problems with the forest as it's growing. I do like to think that seedlings of other species do get dropped into these blocks once we're done and completed planting the trees. That will diversify the types of plants that are in there. But with that said, tree planting is not perfect. However, I do think it's a lot better than cutting down these big swaths of trees and not replacing them with anything. We have to replace what trees have been cut down in the lumber industry with new trees in order to have sustainability and trees going into the future. Another pro is you make lots of new friends, even family. Some of you might even find the one. There's lots of relationships that come out of the bush. Most of them don't last, but there's lots of opportunity for friendships and romantic relationships and such that can last a lifetime with the right person. You get to be yourself regardless. Nobody's judging. I mentioned back there that I got to become, again, my most authentic self without fear of judgment. I think that's more of a general term. Everyone can be themselves without fear of judgment. I've never been one to be that in fear of it, but without a doubt, 100%. Everyone is pretty accepting of who people are out there as long as everyone is pleasant to each other, which most people are because we're a big team. And rebranding yourself or just going into a new version or an old version of yourself that you prefer most is very easy to do in the bush. You get to get dirty and no one cares. You can be filthy as you want, covered in dirt. You don't have to shower, etc., etc. And nobody cares. Everyone's dirty and there's no judgment there. There is good pay if you are successful. That is, if you're a good tree planter and you keep a good pace and you have good land management, and you also don't plant crappy trees, because you will have to replant pieces that you have not done a successful job with, because we have to keep up with client standards. The last pro that I mentioned was the escape from society/societal norms being present. It's like a great reset of sorts of what you've been taught in society, your habits and day-to-day use of different societal tools and things that hinder you, like overuse of social media and electronics. Being away from electronics is great. I think that when I went tree planting, my phone use time went from 4 to 6 hours a day down to sometimes as low as 2 to 3 minutes a day. Very little screen time. It's a great reset for the eyes. And as a child that grew up playing video games most of his life, and using computers in school, and then later creating a business that runs off of electronics, it was the first time for my entire life where for many months I was hardly ever looking at a screen, and I know for a fact it was a very beneficial thing for me. So following the pros, let's go up with the cons. Mentally and physically exhausting. If you are not in good shape, you will be whipped into shape, and the first couple weeks is not a good time. Over time, I found that I got used to it, but I do know that some people get burnt out over the season and are ready to be done towards the end. Me personally, I could have kept going for a couple more weeks if our contracts allowed for us to plant more trees. Tenting or using car beds or trailers for months. That's right. You'll get a couple chances to stay in a hotel room in a bed if we are traveling between different planting sites. However, the rest of your season, for many months, you will be confined to either a tent, a trailer, or a bed in the back of your vehicle. There is little to no reception. If you need to get a hold of people or you do need to be on your electronic devices, depending on where your contracts are. Me personally, one of our contracts was almost a 2-hour drive from the closest cell reception. So the week in which we would work before our day off going into town, there would be zero way to contact me, zero way to know what's going on in the world, zero way to check emails, investments, and such. And that is in the cons section, but as previously stated, it's also a pro because it's a nice reset. Another con: dirty, bloody, and sweaty. Chances of heat stroke and hypothermia. You're definitely at the mercy of the elements. If you're not prepared enough, it can be a not great time. And even when you're just trying to relax on your night off, following a day of work, sometimes it can be very hot or very cold in your tent when you're trying to sleep, which is not always the most comfortable thing. But I think that comfort, in a way, shortens your lifespan, shortens your opportunity in life. So being uncomfortable for a bit is also a pro. It is an unprofitable job if your work ethic sucks. That's just straight up. If you're not going to work hard, you're not going to make good money in tree planting. And for myself, I'm more so there for the experience. The money's a bonus. But yeah, if you're there only for the money, you better figure out how to plant trees quick and good. Otherwise, you're not going to be very happy with your outcome in terms of your income. Another con that I wrote down is that you're very likely to assume a new crippling tobacco addiction. Super common to smoke cigarettes in the bush. It's definitely a cultural thing. It's a comfort thing for many, and it's a very high-stress job. It is one of the hardest jobs in the world. And it's very common for people to take that out and use some nicotine to fill in that void. And when almost everyone's doing it, if you have had any experience with tobacco, chances are you will also be partaking. The last major con is workplace safety, animal encounters. The most dangerous part of your job will be getting to and from work in the company vehicles you are traveling. Logging roads, which are not always greatly well maintained, often gravel or just straight up mud. As much as a raindrop can totally mess up the road and put you in a position in which you're stuck or even in a ditch. So getting to and from work sites is the most dangerous part of the job. However, you are supposed to have a good crew boss with good vehicle training and a license for the larger vehicles to get you to work and back safely, as well as the animal encounters. Depending on where you are in Canada, in Ontario, you're a little bit more safe. You can run into different predatory animals. I believe we do have cougars and a little bit of cat species in Ontario. As far as I know, there's definitely lots of black bears, but black bears, in comparison to what you can run into where I was planning in Alberta, are the cuddly teddy bear, trash-eating equivalent of the grizzly bears. In Alberta, you do notice that there's a lot more animals while passing these logging roads. We did see black bears, caribou, deer, elk, moose. Luckily, we did not see any grizzly bears, but you can run into grizzly bears in Alberta, and these bears are no joke. They're the second worst bear up against polar bears, and they have no mercy. They'll kill you just to kill you. So when tree planting, definitely a great idea to stock up and bring a canister or two of bear spray as a first line of defense, and God forbid if you have to use a knife, you should have one of those in your bag too. We do learn bear protection and how to deter them, and also prevent maximum damage if you are being mauled by a bear. But you definitely want your first line of defense with a form of pepper spray or bear spray. So what was my first week like? A half hour into the video almost. we started in Algonquin, which, little known fact, they actually do log trees in Algonquin. And Algonquin was actually created as a place for recreation, leisure, nature, and as well as a sustainable logging park. And it's a huge, huge provincial park in Ontario, not that far from Toronto. So that's a little known fact about Algonquin. They do cut trees down there. And it's more selective usually. They don't do clear cutting like they do in western provinces of Canada. Over time, there was learning of the details, getting into the routine of waking up very early and eating your square 3 meals, doing your dishes, and getting home and licking your wounds, getting to bed at a reasonable time to get up and do it all over again the next day. I do remember on the very first day, 10-hour days usually, but our first week was an unusually hot one. Most of the time it's cold the first week, like you can see in the background this time of year. And we basically had a heat wave the first week, and I do remember the first day being quite considerably warm. And I remember planting maybe like 500 trees or 600 trees the first day, maybe even 400 if I'm overshooting that. And walking through my piece with my brand new shovel and my brand new bags and trying to figure out how these trees go in. I did like a very tiny 150 tree piece for my starter, and then I moved into probably a 1,000 tree piece at the end of the day just to follow up with the next day to complete. And yeah, I do remember with tree pods in hand and shovel in the other, haphazardly putting it in the ground as a rookie on my first day and thinking, is this really what I want to do for the next 3 months? Like, seriously, this just seems redundant and just a foolish decision. But then I remember what I had told myself. It's only your first day. It has to get better. And this is why you're here. You're here to kick yourself in the butt and be a better person no matter how bad it gets. So see it through to the end. And sure enough, things did get better. On the second day, the temperatures really ramped up. I remember it being quite brutal. One of the girls that was there came stumbling out of the bush in tears, collapsed on the ground, and said that her wrists felt like they were going to break from hitting so many stones with her shovel, which is not a problem you have out in Western Canada. But in the Great Canadian Shield in Ontario region, there is rocks everywhere. It's very hard ground. You're usually using your feet to kick the shovels into the ground, and if you're busting your wrist off of rocks with a shovel over and over again, you can get tendonitis and have different issues with your hands. So I do remember this girl crying. We had lots of quitters the first week, and as well as on the second day, we had another rookie that was probably only about 18 years old. And I remember end of day almost being in, and we had a big cache in the middle of the site that everyone was going to, and this guy came looking really not good, stumbled up to the cache, dropped to his knees, and started vomiting. And I just remember it being so bad, and he couldn't stop. He was just puking profusely and rolled over onto his side for a couple minutes, and we're all thinking he's good. Continues to projectile vomit while laying on his side. And I looked at one of the crew bosses and I said, should I get him some water? The crew boss, Jack, said, no, man, it's too late for him. He's on his own. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he basically was just saying he has heat stroke. He needs a couple minutes. He's gonna puke the water up anyways. We will give him water, but he just needs a few minutes for the puking to subside, and then he needs to be under some shade, and he's done for the day. And he definitely needs to drink some water once he's all done. Some other things that happened in the first week. Again, just the general getting used to things, and some different revisions with gear I had. For example, boots. I had like $100 pair of Steelies, and I had to replace them with a $450 pair, in which were much more sturdy, better traction, and lasted the whole season. It was a very welcoming environment with veteran planters and rookie planters commingling, and really having those veterans welcome us and show us the way and the tips and tricks to the best of their ability. Another note that I had written down, and just as a testament to how friendly people were, I remember getting my food on the first or second day, having a nosebleed into my suit because of the dry temperature, and effectively from there walking out to our campfire to sit down, enjoy a well-deserved meal after a full day of planting trees. And I sat down not wanting to get up, and I was like, I just said to myself, like, shit, I forgot salad dressing. And within like 30 seconds to a minute, one of the longtime veterans, she just walked up to me at the campfire with the salad dressing from our mess trailer where we get our food, and she just gave it to me, and I didn't even know her. And I was just like, wow, that was like a really nice gesture for someone that I don't even know, and I haven't even really spoken to. So yeah, what follows in the next few weeks was my PB story. I think the second week I hit my first 1K. Definitely was itching to hit that, and it's hard to get to it when you're really just learning on the fly. By the second week, I hit my first 2K, and it was absolutely brutal, very strenuous day. Barely made it to whatever it was, 21 or 2200 trees, and I was very proud to beat everyone to the 1K and the 2K, and I wanted more. So at that point, we split camps. We went over to an area north of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, up north there, and I wanted to go bigger. And for 2 days in a row, I tried to hit my personal best. I wanted to hit a 3K. And the first day just didn't happen. The second day, I didn't get enough sleep. If I don't get 8 hours before I tree plant or do anything really, I'm just kind of a useless sack of potatoes. So when the first 2 days had me defeated, having doubts that I could really hit a 3K, it made me mad. I got frustrated, and I said, no one's beat me to this 3K. So what did I do on the third attempt, the third day in a row? I got into my piece. It was a very big one, and it was trenched out. So basically they had sent machines to go through and trench the land, and in which you can kind of plant rows and in between the trenches. And that day I was determined from the last two failures to hit that 3K. I hardly ate that day. Every time I came back to my cache, I was sprinting to it, loading up trees, mixing a little bit of Gatorade for the electrolytes and chugging water, and basically sprinting my ass back into that piece. And all day, thank you, Rez, for your music. I listened to Rez, the electronic music DJ, all day, and basically channeled a dark energy or a second personality of sorts. I became a very not nice person that day, and I was pounding trees the whole entire day, literally screaming at them to get into the ground. Any obstruction or anything that cut me up was just not a matter of something to think about. I had cuts all over, bug bites all over, covered in mosquitoes and black flies, covered in sweat, covered in dirt, and just absolutely crushed my way all the way up to almost 3,400 trees in a day. I did 3,375. And at which point I was definitely destroyed after that day. A friend and I, while we were in town moving to this camp, stopped at a Walmart, and she had pointed out that I should dye my hair blonde. So I said, that's ridiculous. And I was like, oh wait, when's the last time I had an opportunity to change up my look big time? I was like, well, I'm in the bush right now, and there's no standards in which I need to meet to look appropriate for the job, so why not? And that was the purchase with that hair dye, was to hold on to it till I hit a big PB. So I hit the golden 3K, bleached my hair, became a bush nut, and never hit another PB for the rest of the season. That was it. I never hit more than 3K ever again. I hit a couple days over 2,500, quite a few days over 2,000. But in that transition over to Alberta, it was a completely different kind of land, and every time we moved different planting sites, we had to learn how to adjust to the new elements and terrain and such. And the first month we were in Alberta, it definitely took me a good month to pull up my knickers and figure out how to adjust to the new spacing and the terrain and stuff. So the last 6 weeks of my rookie year planting, I did a lot better. I was striving to hit 2K every day, and I would usually come close to it or just make it. Made more money, and yeah, at the end of the season, disappointingly, I did get beat out for Rookie Planter of the Year from another guy, and he's a really nice guy. I really like him. He beat me by I think 7,000 trees. I had 87,000. He hit I think 94,000 for the season, and yeah, but I still knew that I had planted the most trees in a day out of all the rookies, and ironically, only one other rookie had hit 3,000 in the rest of the season towards the halfway mark in Alberta, and anyone else that hit 3K as a rookie for the season, they all happened to be on one crew, and they all hit 3K in the same day. I think 4 or 5 of them, which just really spoke to me that they lucked out and had perfect land, perfect condition, perfect tree delivery. Everything went perfect. So I would say I definitely earned my 3K, seeing as I was the only one to hit it in Ontario in the rougher conditions. And yeah, I was definitely very proud of that. Your rookie year as a tree planter is definitely an investment year, something I've heard over and over again. It's so true. There's all kinds of things you don't realize you'll need. You spend a lot of money purchasing these things, preparing and making new acquisitions of gear and such, and comfort items on the fly. And definitely, like I previously mentioned, into the last 6 weeks of the season, that's when I definitely started to hit my stride, and things started to become a good groove. Got into the best routine possible, and really had that determination to do at least 2,000 trees per day every day, and was hitting it probably 3 out of 5 attempts. And from there, that's when I really was falling in love with it more. It was going well, and yeah, it was good. Everyone at camp was meshing. On our days off, or our booze nights, we call it the last day of our shift, which is 5 days in a row. We would always have cool events, and everyone would get together and have some drinks and just chill out and have a good time, listen to music. And like I said, everything really just started to mesh, and I knew for sure I was going to be coming back for a second season. We had fashion shows, we had anything but clothes shows, we had talent shows, all kinds of different events, sexy plant. Yeah, there's no shortage of fun events to fill in our days off. We even had a proposal from our camp chef and the camp supervisor, who he used to be a tree deliverer, and she was a tree planter, and they moved up to higher positions in the company. He became the supervisor for our camp, and she, like I had mentioned, got a little bit sick of tree planting, but still wanted to be in the bush. So she became the camp chef, and I was told probably 2 months prior to the proposal that I had a secret mission and I wasn't to tell anyone. And I didn't know what it was for 2 months until one day I came home from work and I got called into the trailer office, where there's this tiny little ghetto office for filing numbers off to corporate and such. And I was told, Zach, I'm going to propose to so-and-so. I was like, oh, really? Congratulations. And he's like, yeah, I need you to take pictures. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it before it gets too dark. We'll do it at the campfire. And I had my camera with me. It would have been nice if I had a little on-camera flash, but I'm a photographer, I'm a videographer, that's what I do. So the camp supervisor, I remember at one point I had my laptop out and I was eating dinner by myself the one night, and he came and sat next to me and he's like, oh, what's this? And I was showing him like, oh, this is what I do outside of the bush. And he's like, your work's really good. Why are you here? And I was like, honestly, man, I just needed a break. I just needed something new. And this does bring me back actually to the very first day of planting. I should have scripted this in my script, but we had a get together, sit around in a big circle. Camp supervisor lays out all the rules, regulations, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Bear safety, travel safety, safety if you get lost, etc., etc. All the rules and regulations. And then we went around the group and everyone stated their name, a fun fact about them, and where they were from. And I remember sitting there thinking like, oh, okay. I'm like halfway through the circle, it's going to come to me and I don't know what I want to say. And then I had a genius idea and I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep things real mysterious. So I said, when they got to me, they're like, okay, tell us who you are, fun fact, and where you're from. I said, well, my name's Zach. I am from Niagara Falls, and everything about my life up until this point leading into the bush will remain a secret, which was kind of a strange response compared to everyone else's, and definitely stirred some mystery. And it only took maybe 2 weeks for mostly everyone at camp to know that I was like a creative marketing guy, and not necessarily a YouTuber, but someone that does creative work outside of the bush. And even within a day or two, I had a ZFK visual sticker on my hard hat, as well as one on my, I had like a gas jerry can that was duct taped off and was for water, just because of the easy carry handle. And I had people trying to search it up or trying to figure out what I did, and I had a few different people say, hey, like, are you like a graphic designer? Like, what do you do? What does that visuals mean? So yeah, it was definitely like a good icebreaker and conversation starter. So we're getting towards the end of the video, folks. What are some tips and tricks that I wish I knew? Part of that meshing and really getting into the groove of things in the end of the season was with it being late summer, we went from having a lot of our planting blocks be like pretty undergrown and barren, besides all the tree waste left over from cutting down the trees. Things became very overgrown. There was wildflowers, strawberries, blueberries, lots of little bushes and plants, and the visibility of seeing your trees became very, very difficult. And the more time you waste trying to find your previous lines of trees and where you've planted is not good. You don't want to spend all that time overanalyzing where you've been and where you need to go while you're planting your piece. So I would say the number one thing was flagging. I didn't even flag my first couple days, but towards the end of the season, I really mastered flagging. I was flagging usually by dropping a piece of flagger, which is a colored piece of tape that does, it does decompose over time, so it's not necessarily like too bad for the environment, but yeah, I was dropping those at every tree or every other tree so I could keep track of where I'd been, and it's very like visible from distance. And I learned how to get into high flagging, which was super important for the mountainous terrain. When you're looking down while you're on a slope or looking up, very, very hard to see where you've previously planted. You waste a lot of time, and I had like some serious frustration or times that I had to take a break because I was literally raging. I'd plant a tree, and then I would like take one step or like look in a different like vantage point just from moving my head, and I would say, oh, I've already planted a tree there, so I'd have to pull one out, waste my time to go find another spot for it. And yeah, it was like almost having mental breakdowns over this. So learning how to basically utilize high brush and little plants to tie off knots on, and then have them at a higher level so that it's visible in rows. Like every maybe 4 or 5 trees, I would do these high knots or high flags. That was really a game changer, and it helped me plant much more organized and manage my land better. Another thing that I was doing while tree planting was I would do a lot of dead walking. Dead walking is when you walk in your piece and you're not planting a tree. You want to be planting a tree no matter how or where you're walking. So ideally, if your cache is here and this is your piece, you want to like line in and then basically start zigzagging your trees and lines. And then once you're almost run out of trees, you want to make a line and plant all the way back to where you're going to restock your trees. So cutting down on dead walking was a big one. Early on, the first like month and a half, I pissed off a lot of people by ghost lining. And ghost lining is making a line of trees that doesn't really add up or make any sense to your piece. Or sometimes you ghost line through your piece and into someone else's piece, in which they find your trees and say, what the hell are these? And they get really pissed. And can't wait to get pissed off at rookies that do that to me, because I'll be nice to them at least, because I used to be a king of ghost lighting. But yeah, that was another thing I cut down on. Another big one is front filling and back filling. If your cache is again here, the back of your piece is here, and it's like a square. Something I was really bad for was front filling, because I just wanted to get the front out of the way if that was the easiest part of the land. What you need to do is make the line to the back of the piece and start lining up the back, so that every time you're traveling back to your cache to restock trees, your travel distance gets shorter and shorter, and therefore you can plant more trees. So that was another thing I was getting much better at, was backfilling. Effectively, the last 2 remaining things were effectively just learning how to manipulate my mind to not stop planting, taking shorter breaks, and really only stopping to restock trees and drink water or eat just a little something when necessary. Just other than that, go. Spending less time at the caches. The cache is where we restock our trees, can effectively function like black holes. Time is manipulated. Time flies while you're planting trees, as well as money flies onto your balance sheet. But sitting at the caches, it's almost like time slows and you just kind of get comfy and want to relax there and stop planting the trees, and that's where you lose a lot of money. So those are some of the tricks that I did learn towards the end and really reinforced and got a lot better with. With my second year season coming up in just about a week here, what are some of the things I'm looking forward to in season 2? Well, for one, spending a lot less money on all the little gimmicks and tools and pieces of gear that I need. I have pretty well everything I could possibly need, and I don't have to worry about thrifting for clothes or getting new boots, etc., and all these different items. I now have everything I need, so that will be good. I am out of the investment year of tree planting, which is, like previously stated, you're learning along the way, you're making less money, and you're reinforcing the good planning techniques. Now I kind of have a good grasp on most of the things I need to do to make the money, so it'll be a much more profitable year, expecting a double in profits, and it should be a lot more fun. I'm looking forward to seeing all the fresh faces and helping basically teach, comfort, and reinforce talents and new rookies coming in, and being that good voice of guidance. That will all be a lot of fun. As much as I want things to stay the same and be perfect, quote unquote, as they were last year, there's going to be a lot of different changes and a lot of adjustments, and I am looking forward to those too. It's going to be, like I said, new people, potentially new spots to pitch my tent, to make little base camps, and new challenges every day, and new puzzle pieces of land to unlock and master. So there's definitely a lot of things that I'm looking forward to in season 2. And it's definitely going to be a little bit easier this time around. So what is, to make an outro, the moral of going bush crazy, and what is the moral of the story? I poorly worded a outro campfire speech that I had on our last night together. When being requested or given the invitation to come tree planting for quite a few years back, and having things set in a way in which I liked, and thinking that they would be a really foolish and dumb idea to go out and try something new like this, I really did look down on the idea of being a dirty tree planter. It just seemed like a dumb thing to do and a waste of time. And I guess the moral of going tree planting for me was to never think that you're above anything or any kind of work. I was completely humbled, had my butt kicked. I learned a lot about myself and nature and how I want to structure different things in my life. Definitely, like I said, a hugely humbling experience. I now know that I'm not above anything, and it took my ass and handed it right back to me. So with that said, definitely never rule out anything like this. If other people can do it, so can you, and maybe you'll even enjoy it. Like previously stated, I went in to better myself, subject myself to a level of torture, and I wasn't going to quit no matter how bad it got, and that's what I did. Even when I did want to quit, I stuck to it, and I continued to try and be better every day and wake up and do it all over again, and I have no regrets in doing that. Coming home from tree planting is like coming back from the dead. Everyone wonders when you're going to come back. It feels like a long time. They see you post some things on social media that really makes heads turn, and when you come back with your slightly improved personality, work ethic, and brand new skill sets, it is like you come back reborn as a new person. Folks, that is it to wrap up bush crazy tree planting. And if you haven't already checked out the Guardians of the Earth documentary, do check it out. I think it's definitely a must-see before you check out this video. If you did appreciate this content and want to see more, go ahead and click the subscribe button to see more. Engage with the content by leaving a like and or comment. It does help the algorithm. When people engage with the content, it tells the algorithm that this is good enough for someone to pick up their hands, hit the keyboard, and start engaging with it. So please do that. This has been another episode of ZFK Talks. Thanks for coming and being a viewer. I really appreciate it, and wish me luck in my second grueling season of tree planting. Cheers, and until next time. Peace.